What happens when prejudice meets unbreakable will? When mockery turns to respect, and when the ocean itself becomes a witness to human resilience. This is the true story of Lieutenant Sarah Storm Martinez, a woman who proved that some people are simply too strong to drown, not just in water, but in the face of those who tried to break her spirit. In the unforgiving world of elite military training, where brotherhood is sacred and outsiders face brutal tests, one woman's journey from outcast to legend would redefine what it means to earn respect. What started as cruel hazing would become the birth of a warrior whose reputation would echo through the halls of naval special operations for decades to come. This is not just a story of survival. This is the story of a woman who turned her greatest trial into her greatest triumph, and showed an entire unit of hardened Marines that true strength comes not from who you are on the surface, but from the unbreakable core that lies within. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez had always known she was different from the other Navy SEALs in training. Not just because she was one of the few women in the program, but because she carried herself with a quiet confidence that seemed to unnerve some of her male counterparts. At 26, she had already served 2 tours as a Navy diver and had earned her place in the elite SEAL training program through sheer determination and exceptional performance in underwater operations. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training facility at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado as Sarah adjusted her gear for another grueling day. She had been in the program for 8 months now, longer than most recruits lasted, and she had earned the grudging respect of many instructors. However, not everyone was pleased with her presence. Staff Sergeant Mike Bulldog Patterson had made it clear from day one that he believed women had no place in special operations. A seasoned Marine with 15 years of service, Patterson commanded respect among the younger Marines who rotated through joint training exercises with the SEALs. His broad shoulders and scarred face told stories of battles fought and won, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had seen combat in 3 different countries. "Look at her," Patterson muttered to Corporal Jake Rivers as they watched Sarah complete her morning equipment check. "Acting like she belongs here. This isn't some swimming pool back home, Princess." Rivers, a 24-year-old from Texas with a reputation for following Patterson's lead in everything, chuckled nervously. He had heard the stories about women in combat roles, mostly negative ones, and Patterson's attitude reinforced his own doubts. "Maybe she'll wash out today, Sarge. The ocean exercise is supposed to be brutal." Sarah could feel their eyes on her but had learned to ignore the whispers and sideways glances. She had faced skepticism her entire military career, starting from her first day in basic training 6 years ago. Growing up in a small coastal town in California, she had spent more time in the water than most people spent on land. Her father, a commercial fisherman, had taught her to swim before she could properly walk, and the ocean had become her second home. The day's training exercise was designed to test the limits of human endurance in maritime conditions. Each trainee would be dropped 5 miles offshore in full combat gear and required to swim back to shore while carrying a 40-pound pack. The Pacific waters off California were notoriously cold and unpredictable, with currents that had claimed the lives of experienced swimmers. Commander Rebecca Torres, the exercise supervisor, briefed a group of 12 trainees on the beach. "Today's exercise will separate those who belong here from those who don't. The water temperature is 58 degrees. Visibility is limited due to morning fog. You have 2 hours to complete the swim. Anyone who falls behind the designated time or requires rescue will be removed from the program immediately." Sarah checked her waterproof watch and secured her pack. She had completed similar exercises before, but never in these specific conditions. The fog rolling in from the Pacific created an almost ethereal atmosphere, and she could barely see the support boats that would monitor their progress from a distance. Patterson positioned himself near the group of Marines who would be observing the exercise from one of the support vessels. His plan had been forming for weeks, and today seemed like the perfect opportunity to implement it. He had grown tired of watching Sarah succeed where other candidates had failed, tired of the way some instructors praised her technique and determination. "Shame if something happened to Princess out there," Patterson said quietly to Rivers and 2 other Marines. "Ocean's a dangerous place. Accidents happen all the time." The trainees entered the water in pairs, with Sarah swimming alongside Marcus Thompson, a former college swimmer from Michigan who had become one of her few allies in the program. Marcus had initially been skeptical of her abilities but had changed his opinion after watching her performance in previous exercises. "Stay close," Marcus told her as they adjusted to the shock of the cold water. "These currents are stronger than they look." Sarah nodded and fell into her rhythm. Her stroke was economical and powerful, honed by years of swimming in conditions far worse than these. She had learned to read water the way other people read books, understanding its moods and movements through subtle changes in temperature, salinity, and current direction. The first mile passed smoothly. Sarah maintained her position near the middle of the group, neither pushing ahead nor falling behind. She could see the support boats maintaining their distance, and occasionally caught glimpses of the marine observers through her waterproof goggles. Patterson watched through binoculars as Sarah powered through the water with mechanical precision. Her technique was flawless, her pace sustainable. At this rate, she would complete the exercise well within the time limit, potentially setting a new course record. This was exactly what he had feared. "Rivers, get ready with the boat hook," Patterson ordered. "We're going to give Princess a lesson in reality." The second marine vessel was positioned approximately 2 miles offshore, directly in the path of the swimming trainees. According to protocol, the boats were supposed to maintain observation distance and only intervene in cases of genuine emergency. Patterson had other plans. As Sarah and Marcus approached the 2-mile mark, they noticed one of the support boats changing course and heading directly toward them. Sarah initially assumed it was a routine check, but something about the boat's aggressive approach made her uneasy. "That boat's coming in awfully fast," Marcus observed, treading water momentarily. Sarah looked up and immediately recognized Patterson standing at the bow. His expression was not that of a concerned observer, but of someone preparing for action. Years of military training had taught her to trust her instincts, and every instinct was now screaming danger. "We need to move," she told Marcus urgently. "Something's not right." Before Marcus could respond, the boat was alongside them. Patterson reached down with the boat hook, ostensibly to offer assistance, but his true intention became clear when he used it to snag Sarah's pack and pull her toward the vessel. "Having trouble keeping up, Princess?" Patterson sneered. "Maybe you should have stayed home." Sarah tried to pull away, but Patterson's grip on her pack was firm. Rivers appeared at the boat's edge, reaching down as if to help her aboard. The other Marines watched in confusion, unsure whether this was part of the exercise or something else entirely. "I don't need assistance," Sarah said firmly, her voice carrying clearly across the water despite her exertion. "Please maintain observation distance as per protocol." Patterson laughed harshly. "Protocol? You want to talk about protocol? Protocol says women don't belong in special operations. Protocol says you're taking up a spot that should go to a real warrior." Question 48. With that, Patterson released the boat hook and grabbed Sarah directly, hauling her partially out of the water despite her struggles. The weight of her pack and gear made it difficult for her to maintain her balance, and she found herself hanging over the side of the boat. "Let me go," Sarah demanded, but Patterson and Rivers had other plans. "You know what, Princess? I think you need to learn what happens when you play in waters that are too deep for you," Patterson said. Then, with deliberate force, he and Rivers pushed her away from the boat with such violence that she was launched several feet through the air before crashing back into the ocean. "Perish," Patterson shouted after her, the word carrying a weight of malice that chilled everyone who heard it. Marcus watched in horror as Sarah disappeared beneath the surface, weighed down by her pack and disoriented by the sudden assault. The other trainees who witnessed the incident were stunned into momentary silence, unsure whether to continue their swim or attempt rescue. "What the hell are you doing?" Marcus shouted at Patterson, but the Marine simply ordered his boat to continue on course. "Training accident," Patterson called back. "She couldn't handle the conditions. Some people just aren't cut out for this."
Underwater, Sarah fought against panic and disorientation.
The impact had driven her deep beneath the surface, and the weight of her pack was pulling her down into the darker depths of the Pacific. Her training kicked in immediately, and she began executing the emergency procedures she had drilled countless times. First, she oriented herself by following her air bubbles toward the surface. The water was murky from the churning caused by her violent entry, but she could make out the lighter area above. Her pack felt heavier than usual, and she suspected that Patterson's rough handling had damaged the waterproof seals, allowing water to enter and increase the weight. Instead of panicking, Sarah used her training and natural swimming ability to her advantage. She adjusted her position in the water, using her legs to maintain depth while she quickly assessed the situation. Her pack was indeed taking on water, but she could still manage its weight if she modified her stroke. She began swimming upward with powerful kicks, her arms moving in a modified breaststroke that allowed her to maintain control while carrying the additional weight. Her lungs burned from the extended time underwater, but she had trained for situations exactly like this. When she finally broke the surface, gasping for air, she could see Marcus swimming toward her with obvious concern. The support boats had continued on their course, apparently considering the matter closed. Sarah, are you okay? Marcus called out as he reached her position. I'm fine, she replied, though she was clearly shaken by the experience. Just keep swimming. We have an exercise to complete. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. Are you serious? Those Marines just tried to drown you. We need to report this immediately. Sarah treaded water for a moment, collecting her thoughts and controlling her breathing. The pack was heavier now, waterlogged and cumbersome, but manageable. More importantly, she realized that Patterson had just made a critical error in judgment. He had assumed that throwing her overboard would break her spirit and force her to quit the program. Instead, he had just proved that she was exactly where she belonged. Marcus, listen to me carefully, she said, her voice calm despite the circumstances. We're going to complete this swim. We're going to do it within the time limit. And we're going to show everyone watching that it takes more than some prejudiced Marines to stop a Navy SEAL. The determination in her voice was unmistakable, and Marcus found himself believing that they could actually do it. He had seen Sarah perform under pressure before, but this was different. This was personal. They resumed swimming toward shore, with Sarah somehow managing to maintain her pace despite the additional weight and the energy she had expended underwater. Her stroke remained strong and rhythmic, and her breathing was controlled and efficient. Word of the incident spread quickly among the other trainees who had witnessed the entire confrontation. Some were outraged by Patterson's actions, while others were simply amazed by Sarah's response. Instead of calling for rescue or abandoning the exercise, she was continuing as if nothing had happened. Commander Torres, monitoring the exercise from the primary command vessel, received reports of the incident within minutes. Her initial reaction was fury at the breach of protocol, but she also recognized that any immediate intervention might undermine Sarah's efforts to complete the exercise on her own terms. Continue monitoring, she ordered her communications officer. If she signals for assistance, we respond immediately. Otherwise, let her swim. As Sarah and Marcus passed the 3-mile mark, other trainees began catching up to them. Word had spread throughout the group about what had happened, and several of them made it clear that they were swimming in solidarity with Sarah. How's she doing it? Asked David Kim, a trainee from Oregon who had struggled with previous water exercises. She should be exhausted by now. Tom Bradley, a former college football player, shook his head in amazement. Look at her form. It hasn't changed since the start. Whatever those Marines did to her, it just made her stronger. Sarah was indeed drawing on reserves of strength and determination that went beyond physical conditioning. Every stroke was powered not just by muscle and technique, but by years of facing doubt and discrimination. Every breath was a declaration that she belonged in the water, belonged in the program, and belonged among the elite warriors of the Navy SEALs. The 4th mile brought stronger currents and choppy conditions as they moved closer to shore. Several trainees began struggling with the changing conditions, but Sarah seemed to anticipate each shift in the water's behavior. Her experience as a commercial fishing boat crew member in her youth paid dividends as she read the ocean's subtle signs. Current shifting, she called out to Marcus and the other swimmers nearby. Angle left about 10 degrees. It'll carry us toward the landing zone. Her advice proved accurate, and the group adjusted their course accordingly. Even in the midst of her own battle to complete the exercise under adverse conditions, Sarah was helping her fellow trainees succeed. As they approached the final mile, the support boats converged near the finish line. Patterson stood at the bow of his vessel, binoculars raised, watching Sarah's approach with growing disbelief. His plan had backfired spectacularly. Not only was she going to complete the swim, but she was doing so with a damaged pack, and after being literally thrown from a moving boat. This can't be happening, Rivers muttered, equally stunned by Sarah's performance. Patterson's jaw tightened as he realized the implications. If Sarah completed this swim under these conditions, word would spread throughout the special operations community. His actions would be scrutinized, and his career could be seriously damaged. Worse, he would have created exactly the kind of legend he had been trying to prevent. On shore, a growing crowd of instructors and off-duty personnel had gathered to watch the finish. News of the incident had spread throughout the base, and everyone wanted to see how the story would end. Commander Torres stood at the water's edge, checking her watch and calculating times. Sarah could see the beach now, could make out individual faces in the crowd waiting for them. Her shoulders burned with fatigue, and her legs felt like lead weights, but her stroke never faltered. The waterlogged pack had become a constant reminder of Patterson's sabotage, but also of her own refusal to be defeated by it. Marcus stayed close beside her, offering encouragement and checking her condition. 200 yards, he called out. You're going to make it. We're going to make it, Sarah corrected him. Throughout the ordeal, she had never forgotten that they were swimming as a team, and Marcus had stood by her when others might have abandoned her. The final 100 yards seemed to take forever, but finally Sarah's feet touched the sandy bottom of the beach. She stood up in the shallow water, pack still secured to her shoulders, and walked steadily toward the finish line. Her time was not only within the acceptable range, but actually better than average for the exercise. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause as Sarah and Marcus emerged from the water. Even hardened instructors who had seen thousands of trainees complete similar exercises recognized that they had witnessed something special. Commander Torres was the first to reach them. "Outstanding performance, Lieutenant Martinez. Are you injured?" Sarah stood at attention despite her exhaustion. "No, ma'am. Ready for debriefing." Torres nodded approvingly. "There will definitely be a debriefing. What happened out there was completely unacceptable, and there will be consequences." As Sarah began removing her waterlogged gear, she caught sight of Patterson's boat returning to shore. The Marine's face was a mask of anger and humiliation, and she knew that their confrontation was far from over. But for now, she had proved the most important point of all. Navy SEALs don't sink, no matter who tries to drown them. The other trainees gathered around Sarah and Marcus, offering congratulations and expressing their outrage at Patterson's actions. What had started as an individual act of discrimination had united the group in a way that no team-building exercise could have achieved. "That was incredible," said David Kim. "I've never seen anything like it." Sarah smiled tiredly. "It's just swimming. We all know how to swim." But everyone present understood that what they had witnessed was much more than swimming. They had seen the birth of a legend, the moment when Lieutenant Sarah Martinez had transformed from a trainee into something more, a symbol of unbreakable will and unshakable determination. As the sun climbed higher in the California sky, burning away the morning fog, Sarah began the long walk back to the barracks. Her confrontation with Patterson had revealed something important about herself and about the nature of true strength. She had learned that some people are indeed too strong to drown, not because of their physical abilities, but because of their refusal to accept defeat. The real test, she knew, would come in the days ahead. Patterson would not simply accept this humiliation without retaliation, and she would need to be prepared for whatever came next. But for now, she was content to savor the knowledge that she had passed the most important test of all, the test of her own unbreakable spirit. The investigation into the ocean incident began within hours of Sarah's completion of the swimming exercise. Commander Torres had immediately filed a formal report, and by evening, representatives from both Navy and Marine command structures were conducting interviews with everyone present during the exercise. Sarah sat in the sterile conference room at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado facing a panel of 3 officers. Captain James Mitchell from Navy Special Operations Command, Colonel Patricia Hernandez from Marine Corps Headquarters, and Lieutenant Commander Angela Foster from the base's legal office. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across their faces as they reviewed the initial reports. "Lieutenant Martinez," Captain Mitchell began, his voice carrying the weight of 25 years in naval special operations. "Please walk us through the events of this morning, beginning with your preparation for the exercise." Sarah had spent the afternoon preparing for this moment, organizing her thoughts and ensuring she could provide a clear, factual account. She understood that her words would be scrutinized not just for their accuracy, but for any hint of exaggeration or vendetta against Patterson. "Sir, I arrived at the preparation area at 0530 hours for equipment check and briefing. I noticed Staff Sergeant Patterson and several Marines observing our group, which was standard protocol for joint training exercises. At approximately 0615, we entered the water for the 5-mile swim." She continued methodically, describing the first 2 miles of the swim, the approach of Patterson's boat, and the subsequent events with clinical precision. Her training had taught her to compartmentalize emotions during debriefing, and she drew on that skill now. "When Staff Sergeant Patterson used the boat hook to snag my pack, I initially believed it was a legitimate assistance check, despite the aggressive approach. However, his subsequent actions and statements made it clear that his intentions were hostile." Colonel Hernandez leaned forward, her expression serious. "What exactly did he say to you, Lieutenant?" "He called me princess multiple times, and stated that I was taking up a spot that should go to a real warrior. He also said that protocol meant women don't belong in special operations. When he and Corporal Rivers threw me from the boat, he shouted, 'Perish!' as I hit the water." The 3 officers exchanged glances. The word perish had appeared in multiple witness statements, and its implications were clear. This had not been a training exercise or even aggressive hazing. It had been an attempt to cause serious harm. Lieutenant Commander Foster consulted her notes. Multiple witnesses confirm that your pack was waterlogged after the incident, adding significant weight to your swim. Can you describe how this affected your performance? Sarah allowed herself a slight smile. Ma'am, I grew up swimming in the Pacific with my father's fishing crew. We regularly worked in conditions far worse than this morning's exercise. The additional weight was challenging but manageable. My primary concern was ensuring I completed the swim within the time parameters to avoid giving Staff Sergeant Patterson any justification for his actions. Captain Mitchell nodded approvingly. Your completion time was actually above average for the exercise, despite the circumstances. That's remarkable performance under stress. Thank you, sir, but I want to emphasize that this wasn't about individual performance. The other trainees who witnessed the incident were affected as well. Several of them modified their own swim patterns to stay close and offer assistance if needed. This kind of unit cohesion is exactly what we're supposed to be building in special operations training. The interview continued for another hour, with the officers asking detailed questions about Patterson's previous behavior, any witnesses to prior incidents, and Sarah's recommendations for preventing similar situations. Throughout the session, Sarah maintained her professional composure while making it clear that she expected appropriate action to be taken. Meanwhile, in a separate conference room, Patterson was facing his own investigation panel. His interview was not going nearly as well. The Marine had initially tried to characterize the incident as a legitimate training exercise designed to test Sarah's resilience under pressure. She needed to understand that special operations isn't a game, Patterson told the investigating officers. Combat doesn't care about your feelings or your gender. I was preparing her for the reality she'll face in the field. Colonel Hernandez, who was also present for Patterson's interview, did not hide her skepticism. Staff Sergeant, throwing a trainee from a moving boat while shouting "perish" is not recognized training methodology in any military manual I'm familiar with. Can you explain the tactical value of this approach? Patterson's jaw tightened. Ma'am, with respect, you weren't there. You didn't see the way she was swimming, all confident and superior. Someone needed to knock her down a peg before she got herself and others killed in a real operation. So your solution was to potentially kill her yourself? Captain Mitchell's voice carried a dangerous edge. Because that's what could have happened if Lieutenant Martinez hadn't possessed exceptional water survival skills. The confrontation revealed the depth of Patterson's prejudice and his complete inability to recognize his own actions as criminal rather than instructional. His responses during the interview only strengthened the case against him and sealed his fate. By the end of the day, preliminary findings had been submitted to higher command levels. Patterson would face court-martial proceedings for assault, endangerment, and conduct unbecoming a Marine. Corporal Rivers and the other Marines present would face disciplinary action for failing to intervene in what was clearly an illegal assault on a fellow service member. News of the incident spread throughout the special operations community with remarkable speed. Sarah's swim and her response to Patterson's attack became the subject of intense discussion in military circles across the country. Some viewed her as a symbol of progress and integration, while others saw her as a disruption to military tradition. 3 days after the incident, Sarah was approached by Master Chief Petty Officer Daniel "Shark" Rodriguez, a legendary figure in the SEAL community. Rodriguez had completed more combat deployments than most SEALs completed training exercises, and his reputation for developing elite warriors was unmatched. Lieutenant Martinez, Rodriguez said as he found her completing an evening training session. Walk with me. They strolled along the beach where Sarah had completed her famous swim just days earlier. The sunset painted the Pacific in brilliant oranges and purples, and the sound of waves provided a peaceful backdrop for their conversation. You know, I've been training SEALs for 15 years, Rodriguez began. I've seen tough candidates, weak candidates, smart candidates, and stupid candidates. But I've never seen anyone turn an attempted murder into a recruiting poster. Sarah looked at him with confusion. Sir? Rodriguez chuckled. Martinez, do you have any idea what's been happening since your swim? Applications for SEAL training from female candidates have increased by 300%. Navy recruitment offices are being flooded with calls from women who want to know how to become the next Sarah Martinez. I was just doing my job, Master Chief. Completing the exercise as required. No, Rodriguez said firmly. You were doing something much more important than your job. You were proving that excellence doesn't have a gender. More importantly, you were showing that true warriors don't break when someone tries to break them. They get stronger. He stopped walking and turned to face her directly. I want to offer you an opportunity. There's a classified program developing new underwater infiltration techniques. It requires someone with exceptional water skills, mental toughness, and the ability to work independently in hostile environments. Interested? Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was the kind of opportunity that defined careers in special operations. What would be required, Master Chief? 6 months of advanced training in underwater demolition, covert insertion techniques, and solo operations. You'd be working with some of the most experienced operators in the Navy, developing tactics that could revolutionize maritime special operations. And Patterson's attack? Will that affect my eligibility for classified programs? Rodriguez's expression darkened. Martinez, what Patterson did to you was criminal, but what you did in response was legendary. Every special operations commander in the military now knows your name and what you're capable of. That attack didn't hurt your career. It launched it into the stratosphere. Sarah considered the offer carefully. Advanced training would mean leaving her current program temporarily, but it would also provide opportunities that might not come again. More importantly, it would allow her to continue proving that women belonged in the most elite military units. I accept, Master Chief. Rodriguez smiled. Outstanding. Report to Building 437 at 06000 hours Monday morning. Bring your swimming gear. As news of Sarah's selection for advanced training spread, reactions were mixed throughout the military community. Some celebrated it as recognition of her exceptional abilities, while others viewed it as politically motivated advancement that lowered standards for everyone. Patterson, now confined to base pending his court-martial, learned of Sarah's promotion through the informal communication networks that exist in any military installation. His rage was palpable, and several witnesses reported hearing him make threats against Sarah's safety. This isn't over, Patterson told Rivers during one of their few remaining conversations before Rivers faced his own disciplinary hearing. She thinks she's proven something, but all she's done is paint a target on her back. Special operations is a small community. Word gets around. Rivers, facing the end of his own military career due to his involvement in the attack, was less enthusiastic about continued confrontation. Maybe we should just let this go, Sarge. She beat us fair and square. Patterson's response was immediate and violent. He grabbed Rivers by the shirt and slammed him against the barracks wall. Fair and square? She's a woman. She doesn't belong in our world, and I'm not going to let her destroy everything we've built just because she can swim. Unknown to Patterson, his outburst had been witnessed by several Marines who were already uncomfortable with his behavior. Their reports to command added additional charges to his pending court-martial and ensured that he would face the maximum possible consequences for his actions. Sarah's advanced training began the following Monday with a briefing that opened her eyes to possibilities she had never imagined. The program involved developing techniques for underwater infiltration of enemy facilities, solar reconnaissance missions in hostile waters, and coordination with submarine-based operations. Her training partners included some of the most experienced underwater specialists in the Navy, men who had completed missions in every ocean and under conditions that would challenge the most skilled swimmers.
Initially, several of them were skeptical about working with someone so early in her SEAL career, regardless of her recent notoriety.
Lieutenant Commander Mark Trident Wilson had been conducting underwater operations for 12 years when he was assigned to work with Sarah. His initial reaction to the assignment was less than enthusiastic. Great, he told his longtime partner, Chief Petty Officer Roberto Depth Charge Morales. Now we're babysitting the celebrity recruit. This is going to set our program back 6 months. Morales, who had heard different versions of the Patterson incident from multiple sources, was more open-minded. Maybe we should see what she can actually do before we write her off. Rodriguez doesn't recommend people lightly. Their first joint exercise took place in a controlled environment, the base's deep-water training facility, which simulated underwater infiltration conditions. Sarah would be required to navigate a complex underwater obstacle course while carrying simulated demolition equipment and maintaining radio silence. Wilson and Morales watched from the observation platform as Sarah prepared her equipment with methodical precision. Her pre-dive routine was thorough and efficient, and her equipment configuration was textbook perfect. At least she knows the basics, Wilson admitted grudgingly. Sarah entered the water and immediately demonstrated why Master Chief Rodriguez had selected her for the program. Her movement through the water was unlike anything Wilson had seen in his years of training SEALs. She seemed to become part of the water itself, moving with fluid efficiency that wasted no energy and created minimal disturbance. The obstacle course included narrow passages that required precise navigation, simulated enemy detection systems that penalized unnecessary movement, and timed objectives that tested both skill and nerve. Sarah completed the course in record time while maintaining perfect technique throughout. Impossible, Wilson muttered as he checked the timer. That's 3 minutes faster than my best time, and I designed this course. Morales was equally impressed. Look at the detection sensor readings. She triggered fewer alarms than candidates who took twice as long to complete the course. That's not just swimming ability. That's tactical awareness. When Sarah surfaced at the completion of the exercise, Wilson and Morales were waiting with very different attitudes than they had shown an hour earlier. "Outstanding performance, Lieutenant," Wilson said genuinely. "I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about your abilities based on incomplete information." Sarah removed her diving mask and smiled. "No apology necessary, sir. I'd probably have the same reaction if I were in your position. My reputation is based on one incident, not on proven performance in your specialized field." "Well, you've certainly proven your performance now," Morales added. "That was the most impressive first run I've ever witnessed." Word of Sarah's performance in advanced training spread as quickly as news of the original Patterson incident had traveled. Within the special operations community, she was beginning to build a reputation based on capability rather than controversy. However, not everyone was pleased with her continued success. Patterson's court-martial proceedings had begun, and the Marines' legal team was attempting to build a defense based on the argument that his actions, while excessive, were motivated by legitimate concerns about standards and unit cohesion. My client's actions, while regrettable, were born from a genuine belief that standards were being compromised for political reasons. Patterson's military defense attorney argued during preliminary hearings. Staff Sergeant Patterson is a decorated Marine with an exemplary service record, who made an error in judgment during a high-stress training situation. The defendant's actions constituted attempted murder of a fellow service member, based solely on her gender. No amount of stress or concern about standards justifies throwing someone from a moving boat while shouting, "Perish." This was not an error in judgment. It was a criminal act motivated by prejudice and hatred. Evidence presented during the court-martial included testimony from multiple witnesses, video footage from boat-mounted cameras, and expert analysis of the conditions Sarah faced during her swim. The prosecution painted a clear picture of premeditated assault, designed to cause serious injury or death. Patterson's defense crumbled when several character witnesses testified about his history of discriminatory behavior toward women in the military. Fellow Marines came forward with accounts of previous incidents that established a pattern of hostility and prejudice that extended far beyond the attack on Sarah. The verdict was swift and decisive. Guilty on all charges. Patterson was sentenced to 5 years in military prison, dishonorable discharge, and forfeiture of all military benefits. The sentence sent a clear message throughout the military that attacks on fellow service members based on gender or any other characteristic would face the full weight of military justice. Sarah learned of the verdict while completing an advanced underwater navigation exercise 50 feet beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean. When she surfaced and received the news, her response was characteristically measured. "I'm satisfied that justice was served," she told reporters who had gathered to hear her reaction. "But my focus remains on training and preparing to serve my country to the best of my ability. Staff Sergeant Patterson's actions don't define my experience in the military, and they won't define my future." As Sarah continued her advanced training, her reputation within the special operations community continued to grow. Officers who had initially viewed her as a political symbol began recognizing her as a genuinely exceptional operator who happened to be a woman, rather than a woman trying to prove she could be an exceptional operator. The distinction was important, and Sarah understood its significance. She had moved beyond being a curiosity or a test case to become a valued member of an elite community that measured worth solely by performance and reliability. Her final exercise in the advanced training program would test everything she had learned over the previous months. The mission scenario involved solo infiltration of a simulated enemy facility located on an island 12 miles offshore, gathering intelligence, planting simulated demolition charges, and exfiltrating without detection. The exercise would be conducted in realistic conditions, with opposing forces actively searching for infiltrators and weather conditions that would challenge even experienced operators. Sarah would be entirely on her own, with no backup support and no margin for error. As she prepared for the mission, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 6 months earlier, she had been thrown from a boat by a Marine who wanted her to fail and disappear. Now she was preparing for a mission that would establish her as one of the most capable underwater operators in the Navy. The irony was not lost on her. Patterson's attack, intended to destroy her career and drive her from the military, had instead created opportunities she might never have received otherwise. His hatred had become the foundation for her legend. Standing on the deck of the submarine that would deliver her to the mission area, Sarah looked out at the dark Pacific waters. and smiled. Some people were indeed too strong to drown, and she was about to prove it once again. The submarine USS Hampton cut silently through the Pacific waters 12 miles off the coast of San Clemente Island. In the torpedo room, Sarah Martinez made final preparations for what would be the most challenging mission of her military career. The advanced training program's culminating exercise was designed to test every skill she had developed over the past 6 months. Lieutenant Commander Wilson briefed her one final time as the submarine approached the insertion point. Remember, this is a full simulation with real consequences. The opposing force has been tracking submarine movements in this area for 3 days. They know someone is coming, they just don't know when or where. Sarah checked her rebreather system and waterproof equipment containers one final time. Everything had to work perfectly in the cold, dark waters of the Pacific. What's the current intelligence on their patrol patterns? Boat patrols every 20 minutes along the shoreline. Land-based sentries with night vision equipment at elevated positions. Motion sensors covering the most obvious approach routes. They're taking this seriously. Good, Sarah replied. It wouldn't be much of a test if they weren't. Chief Petty Officer Morales handed her the mission briefing packet sealed in waterproof materials. Intelligence gathering is your primary objective. The demolition placement is secondary. Don't take unnecessary risks for the sake of completing both objectives. Sarah nodded, understanding the wisdom in his words, but privately she had no intention of leaving either objective incomplete. This exercise would determine her placement in future special operations assignments, and mediocre performance was not an option. At 0200 hours, the submarine reached the designated insertion point. Sarah entered the water through the torpedo tube, a technique she had practiced dozens of times but never in operational conditions. The shock of the cold water at that depth was immediate and intense, but her training took over as she oriented herself and began the long swim to shore. The island facility was a realistic simulation of enemy installations that Navy SEALs might encounter in actual combat operations. Buildings constructed to look like communications centers and weapon storage facilities dotted the landscape, while patrol boats with genuine military equipment searched the waters for infiltrators. Sarah's approach route took her along the rocky northern shore of the island, where underwater obstacles and strong currents provided natural concealment but also significant hazards. She had spent weeks studying the underwater topography and memorizing every detail of the approach. 2 miles from shore, she encountered the first challenge of the mission. A patrol boat appeared ahead, its searchlight scanning the water in systematic patterns. Sarah adjusted her depth and slowed her approach, allowing the boat to pass overhead while she remained motionless 15 feet below the surface. Her rebreather system allowed her to remain underwater without creating telltale air bubbles, but it also meant she had limited breathing gas and no margin for error. Every minute underwater brought her closer to the limits of her equipment and her own endurance. As the patrol boat moved away, Sarah resumed her approach. The underwater terrain became more complex as she neared shore, with rock formations and kelp beds that could provide concealment or become deadly traps if she became entangled in the darkness. Her underwater navigation skills, honed during months of advanced training, allowed her to move through the obstacles with confidence. She had learned to read water conditions through subtle changes in temperature and current skills that served her well in the challenging environment around San Clemente Island. 1 mile from shore, Sarah encountered an unexpected complication. The intelligence briefing had mentioned motion sensors covering the obvious approach routes, but she now detected what appeared to be an underwater acoustic monitoring system designed to identify swimmer signatures. The system was more sophisticated than anything she had encountered during training, and avoiding detection required her to modify her swimming technique to minimize acoustic signature. This meant moving more slowly and expending more energy to maintain silent propulsion through the water. The additional time underwater pushed her rebreather system to its limits, and Sarah found herself making calculations about oxygen consumption that could mean the difference between mission success and potentially fatal equipment failure. 20 minutes later, she reached the rocky shallows near the insertion point. Sarah carefully surveyed the shoreline through her night vision equipment, identifying sentry positions and patrol routes before making her final approach to land. The transition from water to land was always the most dangerous phase of any underwater infiltration mission. Her equipment was heavy, her movement was restricted, and she was completely exposed if detected. Sarah waited for a gap in the patrol schedule before making her move. She emerged from the water like a shadow, moving swiftly but silently across the rocky beach to the cover of vegetation beyond the shoreline. Her wetsuit was designed to minimize thermal signature, but she knew that any sentries with quality equipment would be able to detect her if she remained exposed for too long. The first intelligence objective was located in a building designed to simulate a communication center approximately half a mile inland. Sarah would need to penetrate the facility, photograph specific documents, and plant a listening device without being detected by guards or security systems. Her route took her through terrain that challenged every aspect of her land-based infiltration training. Motion sensors, infrared cameras, and human sentries created a complex web of security that required precise timing and flawless execution to navigate successfully. Sarah moved through the darkness with the same fluid efficiency she displayed in water. Her land-based skills had improved dramatically during advanced training, but she knew that her reputation had been built on underwater capabilities, and some observers questioned whether she could perform equally well on land. The communication center was a two-story building, surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with razor wire. Security cameras covered all obvious approach routes, and guards patrolled the perimeter on irregular schedules designed to prevent predictable patterns. Sarah spent 30 minutes observing the facility from a concealed position, timing patrol routes and identifying blind spots in camera coverage. Her window of opportunity would be narrow, requiring perfect execution to avoid detection. She approached the building through a drainage culvert that provided concealment, but also limited her mobility and escape options. The intelligence objective was located on the second floor, requiring her to scale the building's exterior wall while avoiding detection by multiple security systems. Her climbing technique was silent and efficient, using equipment and methods developed specifically for covert building penetration. Sarah reached the second-floor window within the planned time frame and began the delicate process of defeating the security system without triggering alarms. Inside the communications center, Sarah photographed the required documents and planted the listening device according to mission specifications. The entire process took less than 10 minutes, but every second felt like an eternity as she listened for any indication that she had been detected. Her exit from the building was even more challenging than entry, as guards had adjusted their patrol routes during her time inside. Sarah waited in a cramped hiding spot for nearly 20 minutes before an opportunity arose to leave the facility undetected. The second objective was located in a weapons storage facility on the opposite side of the island. This required Sarah to traverse nearly 2 miles of hostile territory while carrying additional demolition simulation equipment and avoiding an increasingly alert security force. By this point in the exercise, the opposing force had detected signs of infiltrator activity and increased their alert status. Additional patrols had been deployed, and helicopter overflights were now sweeping the island with thermal imaging equipment. Sarah adapted her movement techniques to the heightened security environment, using natural terrain features and timing to avoid detection by the increased security presence. Her progress was slower but remained undetected as she approached the weapons storage facility. This building presented even greater challenges than the communications center. The structure was designed to simulate a hardened military facility with multiple layers of security including guard dogs, pressure-sensitive ground sensors, and highly trained sentries. Sarah's approach required her to neutralize the guard dogs using techniques she had learned during specialized training, plant simulated demolition charges at structurally critical points, and exfiltrate before the security force could respond to any alarms. The mission timeline was now working against her. Dawn was approaching, which would eliminate the concealment provided by darkness and make her escape to the water significantly more difficult. Sarah had to balance the need for careful execution with the urgency of completing her objectives before daylight. She successfully penetrated the weapons storage facility and placed all required demolition charges in the precise location specified in her mission briefing. The charges were sophisticated training devices that would register successful placement without causing actual damage to the facility. As Sarah prepared to leave the building, she heard sounds indicating that her presence had been detected. Voices shouted commands, vehicle engines started, and searchlights began sweeping the area around the weapons storage facility. Her original exfiltration route was now compromised, forcing her to improvise an escape plan using terrain and structures that she had not specifically studied. This was exactly the kind of unexpected challenge that separated exceptional operators from merely competent ones. Sarah moved through the hostile environment with speed and precision, using every available piece of cover while making her way toward the shoreline. Behind her, the search was intensifying as more personnel joined the effort to locate and capture the infiltrator. She reached the water's edge just as helicopter searchlights began sweeping the shoreline. Sarah entered the Pacific without hesitation, knowing that her underwater capabilities gave her advantages that her pursuers could not match. The swim back to the submarine pickup point was a race against time and pursuing forces. Patrol boats had increased their activity, and their search patterns were now focused on preventing escape rather than detecting initial infiltration. Sarah's underwater endurance and navigation skills allowed her to evade the surface vessels while making steady progress toward the rendezvous coordinates. Her rebreather system, pushed to its absolute limits during the long mission, performed flawlessly as she swam through increasingly dangerous waters. At the pickup point, the submarine USS Hampton waited in predetermined position. Sarah's approach was detected by the boat's sonar systems, and she was recovered through the torpedo tube just as dawn broke over San Clemente Island. Lieutenant Commander Wilson was waiting in the torpedo room as Sarah completed her mission debriefing. His expression revealed nothing about her performance, but she could sense approval in his posture and tone. "Mission objectives?" Wilson asked formally. "All primary and secondary objectives completed successfully, sir. Intelligence gathered and documented. Demolition charges placed according to specifications. Exfiltration completed without detection during critical mission phases." Wilson nodded slowly. "Time from insertion to pickup? 4 hours, 37 minutes, sir."
That's remarkable time for a solo mission of this complexity.
Chief Petty Officer Morales added. "Most operators would consider successful completion within 6 hours to be exceptional performance." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "The mission parameters were well within my capabilities, sir. The challenge was exactly what I needed to demonstrate readiness for operational deployment." Over the following days, Sarah's performance during the final exercise became the subject of intense discussion within the special operations community. Video analysis of her techniques, timing calculations, and tactical decisions were studied by instructors and senior operators alike. Master Chief Rodriguez reviewed the mission reports with obvious satisfaction. "Martinez has exceeded every expectation we had when we selected her for this program. She's not just competent in underwater operations, she's exceptional. More importantly, she's proven that her abilities extend far beyond swimming." The completion of her advanced training coincided with news that had been spreading throughout the military community. Sarah's story had attracted attention beyond military circles, inspiring women across the country, and changing perceptions about gender roles in elite military units. Captain Mitchell summoned Sarah to his office 1 week after her final exercise. "Lieutenant Martinez, I have news that I think you'll find interesting. You've been selected for assignment to SEAL Team 3 with immediate deployment to operational status." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Assignment to an active SEAL team represented the culmination of years of training and preparation. "Thank you, sir. When do I report?" "Next Monday. But first, I have something else to tell you. Your performance in this program has been exceptional, but it's also been closely watched by senior leadership. You're being considered for assignments that would make you one of the first women in certain classified operational roles." "I'm honored by the consideration, sir, but my primary goal is to serve as effectively as possible in whatever capacity is assigned." Mitchell smiled approvingly. "That attitude is exactly why you're being considered for these opportunities. Your focus on mission accomplishment rather than personal recognition has been noted at the highest levels." As Sarah prepared for her new assignment, she received a letter that would become one of her most treasured possessions. The letter was from a 12-year-old girl in Ohio who had followed news coverage of Sarah's story. "Dear Lieutenant Martinez," the letter read, "My mum showed me the newspaper stories about how those mean Marines tried to hurt you and how you swam anyway. I want to be strong like you when I grow up. I started swimming lessons because I want to join the Navy too. Thank you for showing girls like me that we can be strong too." The letter reminded Sarah that her story had implications beyond her own military career. She had become a symbol of possibility for young women who might never have considered military service or challenged traditional gender roles. At her assignment ceremony to SEAL Team 3, Sarah was approached by Commander Torres, who had supervised the original swimming exercise where Patterson had attacked her. "Lieutenant Martinez," Torres said, "I want to tell you something. In 20 years of training special operations personnel, I've never seen anyone transform an act of hatred into an opportunity for greatness the way you did. You turned the worst day of your training into the foundation for an extraordinary career."
Thank you, Mal. Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that I didn't do this alone. The support I received from fellow trainees, instructors, and commanders made all the difference. Torres nodded thoughtfully. "That's another lesson from your story. True strength isn't just about individual capability. It's about building the relationships and earning the respect that allows teams to accomplish missions that no individual could complete alone." As Sarah took her place among the elite warriors of SEAL Team 3, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. Patterson's attack had been intended to destroy her military career and prove that women couldn't meet the standards required for special operations. Instead, his actions had created exactly the opposite result. Sarah had not only proven that women could meet those standards, but she had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded the performance of many male operators. More importantly, she had shown that true strength came not from physical attributes or gender, but from the unbreakable determination to succeed regardless of obstacles. The legacy of that day in the Pacific Ocean extended far beyond Sarah's individual achievements. Applications for special operations training from women increased dramatically following news coverage of her story. Military policies regarding gender integration in elite units were reviewed and updated to reflect the lessons learned from her experience. Patterson, serving his sentence in military prison, would eventually come to understand that his attack on Sarah had achieved the exact opposite of his intended goal. Instead of driving women from special operations, he had opened doors that might have remained closed for years without his unwitting catalyst. Years later, when Sarah had become one of the most respected operators in the Navy SEALs, she would often be asked about that day when Marines threw her overboard and shouted, "Perish." Her response was always the same. Some people are too strong to drown, not because of who they are, but because of who they choose to become when faced with their greatest challenges. The story of Lieutenant Sarah Storm Martinez became legendary within military circles, but its true significance lay in the broader message it conveyed. Excellence has no gender, determination knows no boundaries, and sometimes the greatest attacks on our dreams become the foundation for our greatest achievements. In the end, the Marines who tried to make her perish had instead helped create a legend. They had discovered, to their lasting regret, that Navy SEALs don't sink. They rise, they adapt, they overcome, and they inspire others to do the same. The Pacific Ocean that had nearly become Sarah's grave instead became the birthplace of a new understanding about human potential and the power of unbreakable will. And in the years that followed, countless young women would look to her example and understand that they too possessed the strength to face whatever storms life might send their way.